Hello everyone. In session 1, we learned about the global expansion of startups. In countries like Japan, where the domestic market is fairly large, startups tend to target the domestic market first before considering overseas expansion. But this approach rarely works out well. As Ms. Kwan Tian from PetSnap said, if you want to succeed as a startup, you should be global from day one. The initial setup is essential. Now, in session 2, I shall explain deep tech startups. Needless to say, building a startup is not easy. Some people start a business and say, I have started a startup. This is misleading. Only a small portion of businesses are startups. Businesses that cannot be scaled cannot be considered startups. Scaling is the key word here. A startup is a high-risk business. The biggest reason for its failure is the lack of demand, or market risk. You conduct user interviews from the ideation stage and create an MVP based on what you have learned from these interviews. Then, you will conduct user interviews to get feedback on the MVP. You will have to iterate many times. As you repeat this process, if, unfortunately, you find that no one is going to pay to use it, you should stop. On the other hand, if you iterate and achieve product market fit, and you get investment from VCs for growth, then you can call yourself a startup. Even so, you now need to exit through IPOs or M&A, as that is what the investors who believed in you desire. You will need to fully commit to the business for at least a few years, or in many cases for 10 years or even longer. In addition to this market risk, deep tech startups have technology risk. Can the technology actually be commercialized? No matter how excellent a technology is, if it cannot be commercialized, no one will be able to use it, and it will not become a viable business. Deep tech startups are startups that aim to scale by using technology as a competitive advantage. It aims to deliver breakthrough scientific or technological advancements, such as AI or space exploration, or to provide solutions to some of the most pressing global challenges, such as climate change and energy transitions. So, what areas are there in deep tech? Representative examples include drug discovery, advanced computing technology, and advanced materials. Others include biotech, food tech, agricultural technology, robotics, as well as novel energy. There are several distinctive characteristics that constitute a deep tech startup. First, it focuses on large-scale scientific breakthroughs or pressing global issues, as mentioned earlier. Secondly, it has a distinct life cycle, characterized by intense early-stage research and development, as well as elevated technical risk. Substantial investment is directed towards technology development, often related to hardware. Thirdly, the majority of businesses are B2B, meaning that they deal with corporations as customers. The fourth point is that it is less dependent on language and culture. Therefore, it typically operates on an international scale in worldwide markets. And last but not least, because it uses very advanced cutting-edge technology, various regulations need to be considered. There are challenges that are unique to deep tech. First, the development cycle is very long. In the software business, a preliminary mock-up in the form of a website or app can be made in several weeks. However, a new drug or rocket doesn't follow that pathway. It will likely take years to get to market. Secondly, It requires a lot of initial investment. Even creating an MVP itself costs a lot of money. You need facilities and equipment as your R&D progresses, which means that you will need a lot of capital from the early stage. This is completely different from software startups, where a computer science major university undergrad can create mockups of a website or app in as little as a few days. Thirdly, financing tends to get complicated. In many cases, it is common to obtain grants from universities, research institutions, or government agencies in the early stage. Potential investors would include incubators, accelerators, and VCs, depending on the stages, which means that you will have to juggle multiple stakeholders. Fourth, the stakeholders involved tend to be complex. As mentioned, fundraising involves a wide range of parties, and since the clients are often corporations, you will have to deal with the many departments within the company. Communicating with these stakeholders in a timely and effective manner is essential for you to proceed. Furthermore, a comprehensive patent strategy is important, as you are often using cutting-edge technology. Oftentimes, IP matters are involved. You will have to understand the overall business and value chain in the target industry, including the supply chain and distribution. It would not be enough to obtain a patent only for your core technology, as all of these will be involved in growing your business. So, you need to think holistically when it comes to patents. At this point, you might be feeling overwhelmed. How can you overcome these challenges? First, you need to understand and engage with the deep tech-specific ecosystem. In traditional technology, the partnership between the startup founder and the VC is often sufficient. However, in deep tech, things are not that simple. As explained, you will have to juggle a much wider range of stakeholders, not only for funding, but also for development and commercial activities. You will need to take an ecosystem approach for both funding and development. For funding, a deep tech startup needs to utilize both public and private financing because traditional VCs and other financiers are typically not equipped to provide the extensive initial funding required. And actually, in deep tech, universities and governments often play the role as financier. They typically support the early stage and also provide the necessary infrastructure, such as labs and facilities, for R&D and product development. For development, universities are also important stakeholders. They hold the intellectual property that you would need and have professors with relevant technological expertise. Adding to these stakeholders, you would also need support from accelerators and incubators that have specific capabilities and know-how. More importantly, you will have to partner with corporations with whom you can conduct POC. Secondly, getting a VC who has orchestration capability is crucial, as they would solve most of your headaches. Let's take drug discovery as an example. There are many things that you need to do even before starting a company. Scientific research, management team, equity story, corporate governance, R&D strategy, business development, a comprehensive IP strategy, regulation, and legal matters are all things that you need to sort out. It may be a different story if you are a serial entrepreneur. However, if you are a researcher or PhD student thinking of starting a business using your research results, it would be almost impossible for you to handle all these matters on your own. This is because all of these tasks require specific industry know-how and an industry network. Startup Builders would be a solution. It's an established model, particularly in the biotech sector in the US. In this model, the VC begins collaborating with researchers from the technology appraisal stage. They take the lead in forming a startup team, including scouting for an experienced CEO and other key members to launch the company. Some of the well-known names are Flagship Pioneering, Atrus, Third Rock, and Atomic. They are based in the epicenters of each industry in the US, such as Boston and San Francisco. In an interesting move, Flagship Pioneering entered Singapore in the fall of 2024 and began collaborating with ASA, a national research institute there. It appears that the company is beginning to focus on a market unique to Asia. Do you remember what Mr. Steven from Vertex Venture said in the basic section? He said, "There is no golden formula that will guarantee you a unicorn." While what he says is true, there is a model that can increase the success rate in some domains, such as drug discovery and biotechnology. In these domains, the customer is very clear: pharmaceutical companies. Therefore, by forming a team with members who have a track record in launching businesses in this industry, the startup can increase its success rate significantly. Conversely, even if the research results are very impressive, it is not a good idea to form a team without industry experience and target diseases that are not the priority of pharmaceutical companies. I think that this is a model that can be adopted in other deep tech domains, apart from drug discovery and biotechnology. Now, let us hear from a startup founder in deep tech. We interviewed Mr. Ram from Hertzwell. He is the co-founder and CEO of the company. Hertzwell is a radar company that transforms low-resolution data to enable safety and advanced autonomous system applications. It produces high-resolution radar point clouds using computational imaging and deep learning. The technology is a chip-agnostic solution. Hertzwell is developing high-resolution 3D imaging radars to help driverless vehicles navigate in all weather conditions. This approach uses weather radar technology from the aerospace industry and miniaturizes it for autonomous vehicles. What inspired the founding of Hertzwell, and what was the initial vision for the company?
So I split that question into two bits. One is why Hertzwell, and then why entrepreneurship. So I'll answer both these questions. So initial I'll answer the bit of why entrepreneurship. So just to give you a background, just for the audience as well. So I'm Ram, co-founder and CEO of Hertzwell. Personal background of me, I'm a pure technical person. I'm an engineer. So I studied aerospace engineering in the UK and in Germany. So most of my work was done in the Europe, where I worked on radars. So radars are nothing but a sensor that spits out radio waves. It hits an object and reflects back based on the distance, the time it takes to travel. We calculate distance, and these kind of sensors are used in aerospace and defense applications. So most of my work was there, and then later part of my work led me to Singapore, where I worked on commercial applications. So that's when I realized, like, I mean, I was working for other startups. Then I realized that something that I can do it on my own as well. Like, yeah, that was my initial trigger, like entrepreneurship, and also personal background of me, like my family. My father is into entrepreneurship. He's into motor manufacturing. My mother is also an entrepreneur. She's into textile manufacturing. So entrepreneurship was by default from the time I was born. Like from the time I was growing up, I always saw my parents doing their own stuff. So only if I started working for another company, then it would have been very different. But entrepreneurship was very natural for me, right from my
I
childhood.
see.
So yeah, so yeah, that's when I started a company, Hertzwell here. Previously, when I was about 12 years old, I started a very small software company, which I sold it to a large t-shirt manufacturing company in India. So I sold a company when I was 12, 14 years old. I made a system for
Wow.
them and I sold. Yeah. So,
Impressive.
and yeah, and then later when I was in Singapore, as I mentioned, after my studies in the UK and Germany, I started a company here where I wanted to focus on radio waves and other applications. So then I started seeing like similar applications in automotive and in industrial application. Then
Oh,
I happened to meet my co-founder in an accelerator program called Entrepreneur First.
ah,
It's an accelerator.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's backed by Ray Hoffman. So we are part of the second cohort, very, very early cohort. And
Ah,
so that's when I met my co-founder Bhaskar. So he comes from a typical automotive background and I come from an aerospace background. So we decided to work on automotive, focusing on safety and reliability. And that's how we got started using radar technology, which is being used in aerospace, but for automotive application. So we
mm,
started in 2017, and like I mean, initially before we started, I think we didn't start writing code or we started building the product. We spoke
mm,
to many experts in that field, like
mm,
literally about 80 to 110 people we spoke in the ecosystem in automotive. Of course,
mm,
Japan being one of them in automotive, very like Toyota is there, all of them are there. We spoke to many
mm,
people, understand what kind of requirement they would have and whether they
mm,
would appreciate something like this if it comes to market. And then we
mm.
started working on the product, and then the rest is history. We got funded by Vertex Ventures and SG Innovate and a couple
Mm.
of others. Yeah. So that's
Oh,
how
that's
we
great.
got started. Yeah.
What was the biggest challenge Hertzfeld faced in its early days, and how did the team overcome it?
The initial is usually when you have an idea, you're very excited about the idea.
Mm,
Then what happens is after a few days, you try out that idea in multiple, like you try out with your customers, you try out,
mm.
then you realize like the energy somewhere drops down. Like the initial you have that
Yeah.
idea energy, then later it drops down, and
Mm,
you're feeling like, is it right thing to do? Am I doing right? You're lost completely for a while. So yeah, that is the time was very challenging for us, especially in the starting. It's not about
mm,
money. Yeah, of course, money is all are important, but what happens is
mm.
you don't have that energy to keep trying different things. So
Yeah.
that was a challenge, and then yeah, and then what we did for that is we we have to remain calm first of all, and then we started getting some signals from the market. So market signals are very important. Whether someone is ready to trust on your product very early on. So whenever the energy was low, we started talking to more and more customers to see if they really have a need. So once
Mm.
we found the customer really has a need, then we start working on it, like try to keep up the energy to build something and deliver to them and start the cycle. Because once if you don't start the cycle, then the energy dies out and you might lose the passion to continue your startup. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was the biggest challenge that I saw. Yeah.
So the validation is, I mean,
Yeah.
very, very challenging until you find
Yeah,
really a
very good.
burning needs.
It takes yes, it takes quite some time because
Mm,
I mean, what do you call idea maze? Idea maze. You have an idea, the market. So your idea is here, and the market need is here. How do you navigate and reach the market need? That was the most challenging bit. I think any company that is the biggest challenging period. If you can navigate the maze properly and reach the market need, then you're there for the long run. When I started, it was just like entrepreneurship was something like it's very cool. Uh, when you're young, you're very cool about startups and everything. But then
mm,
you realize it's very mentally very draining, physically as well
yeah.
as very draining. You
Mm,
put in more hours than you would work for someone. And then the other
mm.
thing is biggest thing is opportunity cost.
Yeah.
Opportunity cost is quite high as well. At least in
Mm,
Singapore, you see your similar age people who are working for a big company.
Yeah.
they have a relaxed life and they have a certain salary every month. So it's very
Yeah.
easy. But for us as an entrepreneur, it becomes challenging with that opportunity cost rising every day. So for me to keep me very sane is, of course, I mean, I try to keep myself very engaged. And like the thing I notice is once you slow down in your company progress, then everything piles up and then you become slow, your energy gets drained. So whenever your energy is down, I think, I mean, whatever, I mean, I play sports weekly, at least 2 sports I play in a week. So because when you play sports, you tend to forget everything. I mean, I don't meditate because meditation is not very natural to me. But when you play sports, you try to be very focused on the sport. Then it kind of gives me the energy to tomorrow to get up and do it. And also, I think being very close to your customer gives you one energy because whenever they say this is something that really they need, and then the morning you get up and that plays an important role to keep you going, no matter what, like whether you have like the world is having an economy issue or whatever. If you're building something that is very useful for someone, that obviously motivates you to get up and work more harder.
How does your technology differentiate itself from competitors in the market?
So competitive, so what we have differences. So just to again give you a background, radar hardware has been in automotive for quite some time. It is quite old technology. People have used it in automotive, but in defense it is more like prevalent as well. So what we are trying to do in automotive space is we are trying to transition this radar because, as you know, radar is slightly older technology than cameras. So cameras in cars are being moving very fast because of consumer electronics. I've been using a lot of cameras, so that has been growing at a very rapid speed. Radars, on the other hand, it's just penetrating the automotive market, so slightly behind cameras. And right now, most of the radars are hardware centric, meaning to say, like just to give you an understanding, in olden days, your cameras has to be like very big, like DSLR cameras only could give you good picture. But these days, even with your smartphone, you can get good picture because of the developments in computational imaging and deep learning. The same thing, we want to digitalize radar. Radar is very hardware centric. To improve what it says, to see more things, you need to add in more hardware, meaning to say more antennas and radars. So what we're doing is we're digitalizing it. We're not relying on more hardware. We're using computational imaging and deep learning to improve resolution. So currently, most of the players in the market are very hardware centric, but we are more digitizing the radar so that it can be very scalable and it can be relevant in many situations. Yes. And digital side, it'll keep improving over a period of time because the deep learning, as it gets more data, the performance will keep improving further and further. And the growth will be exponential rather than very linear growth or less than linear in hardware. Hardware growths are somewhere kind of linear, but if you use software growth, then you have kind of an exponential growth. And what we tend to do is as I mentioned to you, we're digitizing it completely. So if I say about digitizing, we have like likely a very newer concept in it because most of them are hardware centric. They need to do something with the hardware, but what we're doing is completely different and also hard because radar data is very hard for humans to understand. So you can't rely on deep learning using labeling. Usually deep learning works on labeling, human labels, and then the system understands and then performs. For in our case, because radar data is very hard for humans to understand, you can't label. What we do is we don't label. We send all the data to the deep learning, make makes all sense on its own using contextual information, similar like your chat GPTs, where it forms contextual information between letters and words to predict the next word. Same way, we take the radar's inputs, radar reflections, then form contextual information between the reflected points to tell this is a road, then there could be a car in between, there could be a bike, because it reflects both metal and human energy. So we use contextual information a lot, and we don't rely on labeling. So that's why it is hard, but then the performance that it delivers is quite high. Yeah.
Which industry segment or applications are benefiting the most from Hertzwell's radar imaging solutions?
Automotive, because 80% of our focus is just automotive.
Anything? So what is the rest 20%?
Is industrial, like defense, defense and like mining, port, industrial environment.
What were the key factors that contributed to Hertzwell's success in scaling?
Okay, so initially when we started in Singapore, of course, Singapore is a very small market, as you might have known. It's very small market. Automotive, barely anything happening here. But so from day one, we had to go global. It was not like we were waiting for some particular time and then go global. From day one, we were going global. So why Singapore is because Singapore is like quite a nice test bed for because it's a city country, so it's good for technology development, like fast technology development. Government is very proactive. You can test any kind of technology here, which with governments recommend, if you match the government's recommend. So that's why we chose Singapore to develop our product. And our first customer was based in Europe, and Singapore kind of has a good time zone, so you can even talk to someone in Europe, someone in China, someone in Japan, someone in US. So it kind of played an important hub, because most of the big companies' presence are in Singapore. Like some small office they have in Singapore, so it is easy to communicate, and at the same time work with different parties in different countries. So the biggest thing that we took in global expansion is, first is, of course, identifying customer and the market needs. Once you have a customer, what we did is we hired support engineers locally, so that they can take care of the first degree problems. The first degree problems can be handled by like local support engineer, because translation, language, all becomes an issue. That is there. But of course, the main office in Singapore, like where I am in, we do have like bi-weekly meetings with the customer to understand high level performance of the project, what is happening and everything. But the immediate needs are sufficed by our local team over there. So wherever our customer are there, we hire support engineers to help them locally. So you're right. Actually, it is capital intensive because of a deep tech. Any deep tech, I think, it will require quite a lot of money and time. Because deep techs it can test investors' patience a lot. So yeah. So it took us some time in terms of developing a product the customer, like the market needs. Scaling after we get like a big order, scaling was something that was solvable. At least in the initial stages, the supply chain and everything could be taken care. But yes, you're absolutely right. It took us quite some time to get to a product where customer really likes it. And then also during that time, we had to be like sufficient to carry on with that burn. Although we have investors' money, but also we want to make sure that we can get some NREs and like some pilot money, so that till we get to an inflection point. So that was very important to manage the cash flow as well as the product development. So we had to balance both. We couldn't go completely all into product development. We also had to balance cash flow and product development, because like we split it, right? Say like our MVP can take like 2 years or 3 years to develop, because it's quite demanding and complex. What we did is we started building blocks. If they like the MVP needs 3 years, then we started building blocks which can be completed in 6 months, 3 months. And that blocks, we started testing it with customers, just the block. That block we tested with customers, paid or like every stages we started monetizing it so that it kind of becomes easy. Even if sometimes the funding becomes harder, we can still keep continuing it. Yeah. So that was important for us to like break down the MVP so that you can monetize at each and every stage. Yeah. So for us, it took about I think from day one. I mean, we had an very crude MVP. I mean, I would call like a very basic MVP we had, but a proper MVP, it like which you could put it in cars and drive. It took us about, I think the first version, even though it's basic, it took us about 2.5 years. Yeah. As I mentioned, I'm the CEO and my co-founder is the CTO. So yeah. So, but we hired, so we like initially we were very conservative on the hiring. So we hired like very experienced people, but only I think initially we hired only 4 people. Yeah, just totally about 5 people we had. Yeah. So 4 people we hired, just doing what they're good at, and also be as in helping hand. Yeah. So we started with 4 people, then we grew. Yeah. There were a lot of patience, and also had to balance investors' commitments, all of it. Yes. Yeah. Important is in the 2.5 years, like every few months, we would used to release something that we could give it to the customer, because 2.5 years you can't be out of the market, because if you just build it inside the lab, you will not know what's happening in the market. And once you build it after 2.5 years, no one might want your product. So we had to keep delivering to customers in the 2.5 years, keep reiterating, fast reiteration. Every 3 months, 2 months, we would send a product to a customer who would test it and then provide feedback. Based on the feedback, we would improve again. Like this, it kept going on for 2.5 years. Yeah. So the thing is, of course, you got to sell the vision, not just to your team or investors, but also to your customer. This is the vision that you want to create. And say like big companies might also have a similar vision, but it's just they're too big to try it out on their own, because they don't move very fast like a startup, but a startup can do. So, but importantly, they're not looking at 2.5 year then they're also looking at the smaller milestones. In the 6 months, in 3 months time, what I can deliver to them that can enhance their overall system. Because we work, most of our customers are businesses, so B2B, so we don't work with B2C. So most of the business, they want to get some technology to integrate into their product and see how the performance improves. Yes, initially it might be like say like 1x improvement. Then after 6 months, it could be 2x. Then after 12 months, it could give about 8x improvement. And then finally, it could give about 20x improvement, where it becomes very, very attractive for the customer. But if you can clearly map this out to a customer and say, this is today, here we are, but we can take it forward. So, of course, sometimes joint developments are needed, sometimes LOIs are needed, sometimes POCs are needed. You need to balance it. There are many instruments to keep your customer engaged. You rightly put it out there, that saying that why does a customer needs to do all this for your success? But you kind of need to use some instruments, say that, hey, this is what I'm developing with you, and when it reaches here, I give you certain package where the price would be very low for you, that, and then some kind of instrument saying that a particular region I give you some kind of say, if the market is too big, then I can say at this particular section I can give you some rights, exclusive rights, so that different mechanism to engage the customer. Once you sell you sell your vision, yeah, there are a lot of ways, yeah, but then you need to do some JDAs, like joint development programs.
What challenges have you faced when expanding globally, and how have you navigated these?
Challenge, I think, is just understanding the local culture, how the businesses work in local culture. Yeah, because say like example, in Singapore, most of the communication happens in WhatsApp. I mean, most of the communication happens in WhatsApp. Now, if I go to Japan, it becomes a little bit formal. I need to have emails, and then sometimes I need to use translations, line. I think in Japan, line is more famous than WhatsApp. So yeah. So and most of the conversation happens in email, even though just to keep it very formal. So these nuances you have to learn very fast because you need to understand. So that was one challenge to understand cultures. Second is obviously is because every time you expand, you're diluting the focus as well. I mean, good thing is you're trying different opportunities to grow, and the second time you have only one physical body. You can only be in one zone. Now that you are putting your money in different zones, you're expanding, but at the same time you're diluting your focus. Now that I'm focused in Singapore, then if I'm expanding to Japan, I need to give away some of the focus to Japan as well. So yeah, that was also a challenge initially. Until you form a good team locally, then it becomes a very challenge to keep flipping between different countries. That was a second challenge that we had majorly. And the other one I would say is to third is the laws, right? Say like a document transfer in Singapore might be quite easy. You can send through drives and all of it. But in Germany, the laws are stricter for like data. So you need to go through mechanisms to go there, or even if you have to sell a particular product there, you need to get different certification marks. So those are all added difficulties in terms of laws. So I would say culture, focus dilution, and then third is laws. These three were major challenges.
Regulation.
Yeah, regulation. Yes.
So second one, may I also understand it's a resource limitation?
Second one, yes, because as a startup, you're always limited with resources. You don't have the luxury of a big company. So yes, there's you need to balance both, yeah. Because as a startup, you want to grow fast, but you have very less human resources. Yeah. So it's kind of a trade-off, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why
understand.
you need to be very careful. You need to be very careful to expand. Once you expand, you need to be very vigilant. If the performance are not meeting, then is it really necessary for me to expand in this region or focus on something else? Yeah.
What roles did SG Innovate and Vertex Ventures play in supporting Hertzwell's journey?
One is personal growth, definitely. Like founder coaching. I think both were very good in shaping me because when I started, I was very young. I think I was just in 20s, my mid 20s. So when I started, I think I was 25, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So they guided me pretty well. What are the mistakes, all that. I mean, Genping worked very closely with me, who you know, he's quite good. So, and SG Innovate also helped me in few other things and legal aspects and all of it. So that is one, personal coaching for the founders. Then second is business connections, because they're a big investor group and they have better connection than us. So they can reach out to bigger companies which are in their network. So that was very useful. Connections and network. That was important. And third thing is, I would say, is business maturity, like strategies. Like say today, I want to say that, hey, I want to go and set up an office in Japan. There is demand for me. But because I have these folks like Vertex and SG Innovate in our board, then I can go to them and just say, hey, this is what I'm planning to do. So there is always a sounding board, like an echoing board to see, to check whether what are you doing is correct or not. So I think more than the money, these are very important in the early stage. I mean, when you're growing fast, it doesn't matter, but when you're early, and especially when you're a deep tech company, that matters. And fourth is patience, of course. Deep tech investors have to have additional patience than needed than normal, like internet VCs or consumer VCs. So patience, I think these 4 were very important for me.
So, what do you think? It was a very insightful talk, not only from the perspective of deep tech startups, but also on how young entrepreneurs have overcome the many challenges that they face in this journey. I shall now summarize some of the most important points that Mr. Ram shared with us. First, it is important to identify the burning needs of customers. Mr. Ram said that he felt like he was going to break down many times during the validation process. Validation is much more difficult than many people think. If you proceed without clarity, you will surely fail. This is especially fatal in deep tech, where MVP takes time and money. Secondly, how to survive the MVP development phase. Mr. Ram said it took about 2.5 years to develop a proper MVP. The company originated from an accelerator called Entrepreneur First, where they received initial funding and other support. After the demo day of this accelerator, they received investments from SG Innovate and Vertex Ventures. Concurrently, they made money through joint development and contract work with early customers while developing the product further. Grants are often an effective source of funding in this phase, so find a way to fit it in your company strategy. Thirdly, finding an early customer to conduct POC with is crucial. Deep tech's customers are primarily corporations, so it is impossible to commercialize without conducting POC. Use all possible connections to get a POC partner. Do not hesitate to ask for introductions from investors. Mr. Ram was creative in providing benefits to clients, such as offering a very competitive price, especially for them. Build a win-win relationship with your business partners. The fourth point is global expansion. Deep tech products themselves are universal, but the way business is conducted needs to be localized. As Mr. Ram said, localization is necessary in terms of communication. For example, using WhatsApp is acceptable for day-to-day matters in Singapore, while formal emails are widely used in Japan. Also, there are regulations that cannot be avoided in deep tech. For example, each country would have different authentication mechanisms when you plan to sell your product, so you will have to pay close attention to it. Lastly, it is important to have a VC that you can rely on for resources besides funding. Mr. Ram said that as a young entrepreneur, the coaching that he received from a VC was very effective. In addition, he said that support in terms of the network necessary for growth, such as introductions to potential customers, was very helpful. So, what would be the key success factors for deep tech startups? First, it is important to have members with extensive commercial experience in a target industry. Deep tech tends to attract attention as a cutting-edge technology, but a business cannot progress with the inventor alone. It is essential to have domain experts who are familiar with the commercial side of the target industry and can do business development. Next, you need to have early customers who resonate with your vision and are willing to support your POC. Without POC, it is impossible to commercialize deep tech. You will also need VCs who can provide holistic support beyond just funding. As there is a wide range of stakeholders in deep tech, building a network in the ecosystem is extremely important. In Mr. Ram's case, he met his co-founder and received investment from a VC after being accepted into a well-known accelerator. This accelerator itself is also a pre-seed VC, so his network has expanded from there. This community could be fostered from a university incubator if you are a startup from university. Unless you are a serial entrepreneur who already has a network and is well connected across the ecosystem, joining an accelerator or incubator will broaden your access to the necessary resources and increase your chances of success. When Japanese startups plan to expand globally, language and cultural differences often become barriers. However, since the value of the deep tech product itself is universal, it is inherently suited for overseas expansion. This is an area in which Japan, with its strong technological advantage, has a good chance of succeeding in on a global scale. Please watch this video as many times as you need as a reference when you plan to launch a deep tech startup. I hope that as many deep tech startups as possible will be born from Japan, and that it will become the competitive edge for the Japanese economy. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next session.